My name is Tyler Osburg-Head. I have been working in the wine industry now for 16 years here in Sonoma County. I've lived here now for 17 years. I am originally from the Central Valley, a little tiny cow town just north of Modesto. It's called Escalon, very, very small, but I quickly realized I needed to get out of there and I transferred to Sonoma State University, majored in wine business. And I'm currently on the executive board of directors for the Alumni Association. And I am the director of hospitality and operations here at Martin Ray Vineyards and Winery. I originally heard about this fantastic new wine competition through some colleagues of mine, and I thought it was one of the best kind of new ideas when it comes to wine competitions and just trends that are happening. And under 40 is a which I barely am still part of, but I am. And Something that I've really learned within the wine industry and just kind of wine in general is you have to keep reinventing yourself. You have to keep pivoting. I quickly realized that very early on with, if there's a wildfire, unfortunately, or if there's a pandemic, what works, what doesn't work. So we've been able to really succeed in that here at Martin Ray specifically. We make a Verjus, a Pinot Noir, and a Estate Chardonnay, which is a non-alcoholic, non-fermented grape juice. And we sold out of our previous vintage already. So, again, just new trends, reinventing yourself is something that I've really learned is popular. But that's part of the new trends, part of this new concept of this new wine competition. So I'm just thrilled and honored to be a part of it. I think it's what they like, what they don't like. I think is the obvious answer. But there's so many options out there now. I mean, when I was in my early 20s, having a non-alcoholic wine didn't exist, right? And like having a hard seltzer didn't exist. And so now there's all these other options. Don't get me started on cannabis, right? Um, or get me started. There's so many options out there that I think that's what we're competing against, right? And so just kind of capturing what's working and what isn't working is something that we need to be very transparent about in the wine industry and just the hospitality industry in general. And so I think that's something that we're starting to look into and we're starting to kind of understand as a whole. But not to be afraid of that and just to kind of peel back the pros and the cons of that is something that if we're not real with ourselves, then where's the wine industry going, right? So I think that's very important to point out. The organic, biodynamic, sustainability aspect of things with our generation, the under 40-year olds are so much more conscious of and so much more open to compared to maybe like the 50 and older or again just the 40 and older generations were more of I'm they when you ask them what wine do you drink or what wines do you like, they go, oh, I like cab. It's like, well, why do you like Cabernet? Do you like Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc? Or are you just saying that because you think you're supposed to say that? Where I feel like our generation is, they're choosing varietals to drink and they're choosing wines to drink, not just because of what they're called or what the varietal is, but also the history behind it and the story behind it. And that's where sustainability comes into mind, and that's where how was the fruit grown? Was it intended to be sustainable, or was it just by accident? Right? Like I think there's just so much more to it in our generation than than maybe the older generations. Don't be afraid to fail, right? I, it's that whole phrase of what sticks, right? So it's like you throw something on the wall and maybe 90% of it will fall. But that 10% is crucial. And then just building on what works. That's for years we tried to make a non-alcoholic wine. And we realized we don't like any of the non-alc wines that are on the market. Nothing really stood out to us. So that's why we went in a different direction and we made a verjus instead. And you can make a mocktail with it. You can make a cocktail with it. You can make a vinaigrette with it. We call it a kitchen essential. And so, that's the 10% that worked for us. And so now we're building off of that. And now we're expanding that portfolio in vintages to come. So stay tuned. But I think the biggest advice I can give is again, don't be afraid to fail. That's part of the reinventing yourself aspect. The trends are ever changing, especially with our generation compared to other generations, and to just keep figuring out what's working, what isn't working, but don't think in this box. You always have to think outside the box, and I know that's obvious, um, but you have to say it. You have to hear it, right? You have to represent that, and that's so crucial. Reinventing certain maybe older varietals, right? I mean, Chenin Blanc, I feel has always been my favorite varietal, but kind of in a better sense of a word, resurrecting, right? Like there's so many varietals that have kind of gone dormant in popularity, and kind of bringing those varietals back to life, right? And reinventing those varietals and kind of reintroducing them to our generation compared to the older generations, is exciting, right? It's exciting to see, these kind of classic varietals done in a completely different way with a vision of our generation. Instead of having a Riesling with higher residual sugar, it's a bone dry Riesling, just as an example, right? Where Flying Nun was very popular back in the day with the Riesling and the Gewürztraminer, but it was done in a sweeter style. Now it's a Riesling and Gewürztraminer that are bone dry. So I think those are exciting things to kind of see pick up and take into the future of what our industry can do.